Philip Patrick, he's a precious metal expert with Birch Gold. We always talk about gold here. I don't know if you know this, Philip, I was at one time a precious metals dealer. I did stuff a long time ago. I was a commodity broker for many years. And before I got into I was in radio, got out of it because I'm like, I want to make a lot of money. And there's a lot of money to be made there. I've always loved the financial markets, and the physicals are amazing. And let's be real, I remember back in the day when gold was so low, you couldn't give it away. And that is not the case anymore.
No, it's absolutely correct. Gold has been on an absolute tear. And I kind of shared your view on that in the sense that I question whether gold had become a relic towards the turn of the century. Because if you looked at the 20th century relative to financial markets, it didn't grow that much. This century has been an entirely different picture. And it's no surprise when you look at what changed at the turn of the century. It's when we started massively increasing money supply, massively increasing debt. Surprise, surprise, there's a direct correlation between growth in gold and growth in the money supply.
You know, Phil, you talk about that because I was there for the switchover between, the Y2K and the world's coming to an end and all of these kind of things. And man, gold was nowhere. And then, of course, the fear factor came in because that's a lot of what drives people, or used to drive, was the fear. You sell the steak, you sell the sizzle, not the steak, because you're never quite sure. Gold is one of those things that can be very emotional. It's different now, though, because, the global impact that gold has. It's not just an isolated market with a few different places, big money heads there. And more you're seeing that. And then, of course, with BRICS and the dollar and the 80 years that, the dollar's been dominant, and countries that want to get away from America and the dollar, there's a lot of pressure in gold and on gold than's ever been that I can even ever remember.
It's absolutely, and same with myself. I actually just came back from Rio. I was at the BRICS meeting reporting for Birch and other places. One thing we've realized, the BRICS are committed when it comes to de-dollarization. They all have different reasons. They're not a political unit. They're all pushing for their own reasons. Russia need to move away from Western sanctions, right? 98% of their trade deals now are done bypassing the dollar. China see themselves as a global leader. They have their own reasons. Obviously, they have aspirations for Taiwan as well. How much do they want exposed to the dollar when they make those moves? Brazil, different motivations. So all have different drivers, but all motivated in the same area, and that is to de-dollarize longer term. And in those climates, precious metals do exactly what they're doing today.
Talking to Philip Patrick, who is a precious metals expert with Birch. You talk about the BRICS, and so you've got Brazil, Russia, India, Iran, China, several other nations. The dollar, the one thing about the dollar is it's a fiat currency, but it's stable comparatively to everybody else. China, where are you going to go? Because the reality is you don't let anybody do anything with your currency. So people do want something that is stable and that's not going to be overthrown tomorrow. When you were there, what was the sense? You said it wasn't all political. Some of it was, at least for all of them, the same political reason.
Listen, you are absolutely correct. Look, what has cemented the dollar's position as global reserve currency since the 70s has basically been stability. So there's two things that cement it. Stability is one, trust is the other. It's getting harder and harder to argue. The dollar's had its worst start to the year, I think, since the 70s, lost 10.5% value this year alone. Since the pandemic, since 2020, it's lost about 25% of its buying power. So huge deficit spending, huge debt is showing the world that perhaps the dollar won't be stable moving forward. The other side of it is trust, right? The trust was broken in the eyes of many BRICS nations, predominantly in 2022, when Biden seized Russia's assets, regardless of morality, and I want to be very clear, forget morality for a moment, it was a dangerous precedent. We told the world, look, if you make a decision that we morally object to, your assets can become liabilities, and it has incentivized countries to look. Now, the only thing, and you rightly mentioned, the only thing cementing the dollar's position still as global reserve is that there isn't a viable option. It's certainly not the Chinese yuan. It's not the Russian ruble. As bad a shape as the dollar is in, it is still the tallest midget in the room. But this is where gold comes in. See, gold buying is being used by central banks as a tool to de-dollarize. 2022, 23, and 24, and by the way, the first half of this year as well, central banks have set consecutive records for gold buying. I saw Nicholas Taleb, the author of Black Swan, talking on Bloomberg the other day, and he said, look, The dollar is losing global reserves. And the presenter sort of looked back and said, well, what evidence do you have? And he said, look at central bank gold buying and look at gold's performance. Last year, gold became the number 2 global reserve asset, overtaking the dollar and the euro. And the argument is this: the more this happens, the more that people move away from the dollar, the less that it is, the less or the weaker the argument starts to become for the dollar as the global reserve. I don't think the Chinese yuan takes over short term. What I do think happens is we move into a more multipolar world. We see other currencies start to be used. The dollar value starts to fall. And the first nation or block of nations that can offer a viable alternative, that's when we lose it. So I think it happens longer term, but it begins today.
I'm talking to Philip Patrick. He's the spokesperson, precious metals expert. You look at gold. I always tell everybody, you go back centuries, right? Not just years, decades, go back centuries. Gold is traded forever and a day. Gold has been precious. There is a finite amount of gold on the planet. We're not producing any. Nobody's producing anything tomorrow. It has always been there. It has always been a safe haven for people to flock to in times of nerves. And that's why I think a lot of people thought maybe their day was done, but obviously this is showing it's not done at all.
It's not done at all. And we've been so fortunate. We live in the West. We live in the United States. Since 1946 until today, the dollar has been stable. But people have to understand that is the historic aberration. Currencies are not that stable. You go to China, the populace buy gold in large quantities and have never let up because they understand the fragility of currency. Where we're heading to today, this is late stage empire stuff. This is what happens to every empire in history. You overexpand, you print money you don't have, you run deficits, and ultimately it only ends in one place.
What about tariff? I think tariffs is a good place. Trump's out there this weekend. We're going to add more tariffs over here. We're going to add some tariffs over there. Everybody's tariff. You're a tariff. I'm a tariff. Everywhere's a tariff. What about tariffs? Because maybe we don't think about it in that nature because, they're trying to build up the reserves and look at all the money we're finally bringing in. But the reality is this is going to have effect on gold prices as well.
It has a big effect. Listen, tariffs is interesting. I don't think they're very good revenue generators. They haven't been for 100 years, simply because the global economy is so intertwined, right? Like when Trump put tariffs on China in 2016, China slapped tariffs back on us. And for every dollar they generated in revenue, we had to give back 95 cents to US farmers. So tariffs as a revenue generator are not a big one. Look, the problem with tariffs at a time like this is we're relying on the world to buy our debt. Right? If China and Japan, which they have been, dump US debt, we're in big trouble. So there's a time to use a hammer and there's a time to use a scalpel. And in my mind, we need to be very smart with trade policy. We need to bring our allies together and work against this de-dollarization effort. It's not all about short-term revenue. It's about making sure we have a market for our debt longer term. So Trump's skating a line. I'm going to be really interested to see how Scott Besson negotiates these trade deals. In my mind, we need more carrots than sticks. But ultimately, a climate like this, as we're seeing, is really good for gold. The more global instability we have, the more the businesses struggle to plan, and that's what tariffs do, the higher gold prices will go.
Talking to Philip Patrick, precious metals expert with Birch Gold. So, the funny thing is, you talk about right now, the tariff thing is very interesting because it is strategic in certain ways, and we get it. A lot of it's a negotiating ploy. But in the precious metals markets, in gold and stuff like that, you've also got wars. Let's not forget all about the unrest around the globe, which we haven't even talked about what the unrest with Ukraine and potentially the Middle East, what it could do for gold and the precious metals markets, on top of strategic tariffs. This thing is still ripe for a big move.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at for me to come with Birch Gold Group and say, hey, we think gold's going to be, look at investment banks. The predictions, they are raising them. Like last year, they said, 3,500 by the end of this year. Obviously, we were there mid-year. Now they're scrambling and upping their predictions based on consistent demand from central banks. UBS have come out and said 4,500 by end of next year. Most investment banks now are significantly upping their predictions. And it's because of the reasons you mentioned. This is the perfect storm for gold. We have de-dollarization, we have inflation domestically, we had a first quarter of negative GDP growth, we have global instability, we have wars in the Middle East and in Europe for the first time since the 40s. I mean, it is the perfect storm for precious metals, not the perfect storm for the world, of course.
You know, one of the interesting things. So my buddies all come to me because, you know, I used to do this and I always laugh. I say, look, before you guys got into crypto, there was gold. Gold was crypto before crypto became crypto, and it was a gold bro thing, and rather than the crypto bro thing. And that's the truth. I mean, gold has been, again, you go back to the Bible days and beyond. They all had gold. There was a reason for that. And having the physical, which is what we're talking about, whether it's backed in your IRA or 401k or actually in your hands, is something that is. There's just something different about it.
It's absolutely correct. And listen, look at what we're seeing today. Central banks are de-dollarizing. They had an opportunity to move reserves into Bitcoin or this or that, and they didn't. Ultimately, they moved to gold because it has a longer history. And more importantly than that, gold is a contrarian asset. Its relationship with other assets is well established. We know that when inflation goes up, gold goes up. We know that when the dollar goes down, gold goes up. We know that when we see big recessions, people flood to gold. We don't have that. In fact, everything we've seen so far from crypto, sort of Bitcoin is moving almost in lockstep with the NASDAQ. So it tends to move with the economy, not a contrarian play. But like I said, you know, gold is money, like you said, brother. That goes back thousands of years. The key was watching central bank. I started this interview saying 20 years ago, I started to question whether gold was a relic. Today, I know it's not, right? And you can take everything I say with a pinch of salt. If central banks are consecutively setting records, it shows you where it's going. But the big concern for us is that a bet on gold at that level by central banks, it's a bet against the US dollar. And I would say they rarely get currency bets wrong. Maybe.
No, they don't. I mean, you know, currency is one of those. Pay attention to currencies. Pay attention to what people, because the one thing that you and I have talked about is it's easy to manipulate currency. I mean, there's a thought that, you know what, Trump wants the dollar to be down because it makes it more enticing for people to come here and purchase goods here, which would be great for the economy to export stuff. And so by pushing the dollar down, gold will rise.
It's exactly it. And that's why central banks and countries buy gold when they're worried about currency. Gold and the dollar have an inverse relationship. And that goes back to biblical times, right? Gold, it per religious scriptures bought 400 loaves of bread, and it does the exact same thing today. So gold's value stays the same. When currency weakens, we just need more of that weaker currency to buy the gold. It's exactly why, and that's why I go back and I say, bet on gold at that level. That's a bet against the dollar. They're inverse.
Absolutely. Talking to Philip Patrick, spokesperson and precious metals expert for Birch. Snap forward the next 6 months. You want to give people a shout out about what you guys are doing, but where do you feel like this thing has legs still to go?
I think we've got a lot of movement, and I think it will be over the next 6 months, but I think it's going to continue beyond that. I think there are so many different drivers now. And like I said, I think we're moving into a very multipolar world. President Trump has a very difficult job in front of him. And I'm a Trump guy, right? I've been that for years. I've been championing it, but it's a very difficult task. He needs to grow the economy faster than we're growing debt. I mean, debt since the 80s has averaged 8.5% growth a year. GDP's averaged 3%. So this idea that we can triple our GDP, it's a very, very tough task. So I am hoping and praying that these guys can pull off what nobody in history has, but I'm hedging my bets. Just like central banks around the world are doing it, I'm doing the same thing. And I think to have everything exposed to a dollar when we have $37 trillion of debt, $2 trillion of debt, it may not be prudent, right? And I think hedging yourself, look, most importantly, people should just read, get informed, watch your show, get informed, because once you have the information, the decisions will be easy from there. And that's what at Birch, we're big on. We have a ton of free information, how, why to invest in gold. Get the information, whatever they want to do with it. But just read, because if you do, the solutions will present themselves. And I think there
absolutely. And if you're watching this, text Benson to 989898. That's me, Benson to 9898. You text it right there. Birch will get you out all the stuff about IRA, 401k, about your savings, what you're looking at, whether it's a physical, what you're looking to do. They'll take care of you for your retirement and all the things you work for really hard for. So text the word Benson to 989898 today. Philip, appreciate you coming on and look forward to doing it again.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.